Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Automation Alley's virtual tech takeover, hosted today by Crown Castle. My name is Allison Trumbull, and I am Automation Alley's relationship manager. Here at Automation Alley, we are Michigan's Industry 4.0 Knowledge Center and a World Economic Forum Advanced Manufacturing Hub, or AmHub. We obsess over disruptive technologies like blockchain, 3D printing, and AI. Our goal is to take these big, complex concepts and make them easier for companies and individuals to understand and implement. We work with a wide range of companies, from those that are grasping the concept of digitization to thought leaders and innovators in Industry 4.0. And we do this by hosting a plethora of events, obtaining content from every aspect of industry and academia to give businesses a competitive advantage and help them along their digital transformation journey. Speaking of events, we do have our Integrate or Industry 4.0 conference coming up October 19th. This is going to be a hybrid event, so it'll be virtual and in person at TCF Center in Detroit. There are a limited amount of sponsorships available, so please reach out to me if you're interested in an expo booth, speaking, or any branding sponsorships. And don't forget, all Michigan manufacturers receive one free ticket courtesy of the MEDC, so please reach out to get that as well. But now on to our presenting company. Crown Castle is the nation's largest provider of communications infrastructure, connecting people and business to essential data, technology, and wireless service. They work closely with community members, government officials, and customers to design and build solutions to meet unique connectivity needs. From wireless coverage to smart city solutions to custom fiber optic networks. With new advancements like 5G, edge computing, and more on the horizon, Crown Castle is a reliable partner to help stay connected and take advantage of this digital transformation. Today, we're really going to dive into the topic of leading your company through digital transformation. More tasks are being automated, processes are moving to the cloud, and revolutionary technologies are changing customer experiences and internal operations. As you look ahead at your own technology roadmap, do you have the infrastructure to accommodate the influx of data and devices? Today, we're going to talk about these challenges and how companies such as your own can take advantage of solutions like edge data centers, 5G, and more to stay ahead of the curve and really start your digital transformation. So this afternoon, we are going to be joined by Mark Rudnick, VP Technology Strategy, and Thomas Lanahan, Director of Sales. So throughout this presentation, don't forget that there is a Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. So please ask questions. We're going to answer them all at the end, but we don't want you to forget. So please type those in and we will make sure to answer them all at the end. So thank you everybody for spending your lunch with us today. And without further ado, Mark and Thomas, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Allison, I appreciate it. And everyone, thank you for joining the session today. My name is Thomas Lanahan, and I'm the Regional Director of Sales for the Midwest for Crown Castle. I'm joined by Mark Rudnick, who is our VP of Technology and Strategy. In our roles, we work with partners across the wireless and fiber industries and have experience growing and deploying networks of all types across many different partners. Today, we're going to talk about how you plan for the continued digital transformation of your organization, and specifically, how do you prepare for scale and change? Essentially, what you need to do to put your organization in position to take advantage of new technologies quickly and cost effectively. However, before we get started, I'm going to let Mark talk about some work he's done with the Living Edge Lab at Carnegie Mellon University, so you can get an idea of his role and expertise. Mark?
Thank you, Thomas, and I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. So to give you an idea of the work that we're doing at Carnegie Mellon's Living Edge Lab, this is an industry-wide consortium, and I think we'll be talking about partnerships throughout this entire presentation today, where we're taking edge applications, and I'll get into a description of what those mean, from the lab into the real world. And to be able to make this happen, this is a group of people that we're working with across from the university and students developing some of these applications through industry partners like Amazon, Microsoft, Intel, and the wireless carrier community as well. So the idea is to be able to create an application within this environment, within the lab, and then we've deployed using our fiber and small cell infrastructure, including streetlight locations and rooftops, a real world wireless test bed to be able to try this out within the community. And so I'll talk about some applications. One of them, which is really dear to my heart, is using augmented reality to put together furniture that you might get from IKEA. So I don't know about you, but when I've gone through and built a bookshelf or a desk, there's always these leftover missing screws, or I put something in upside down. And the thought process of having a augmented reality glasses guide you through how to put the piece of furniture together so you don't have to go take it apart and flip the shelf over. That would be very much time saving, and not to mention the frustration you would save as well. And we'll talk about another use case, which is more healthcare oriented later on in the presentation, using augmented reality to enable it to guide you through the utilization of a defibrillator. And just as a reminder, as we're going through the presentation, please feel free to add some questions into the chat, and I'll check in with Thomas as we go through. If there are questions that come up, we'll do our best to answer those either throughout the presentation or at the end. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is that digital transformation is happening all around us. When we think about what innovations that we have and how this is happening, there are big changes within all different types of organizations. It could be within an enterprise, within a manufacturing facility, within healthcare, and we've talked about that just a little bit. And this transformation has been happening for years. It's not like digital transformation just started happening yesterday. Think about things like recommendation engines. Amazon's a great example of this, or Netflix. What movies would you like or don't like? And something as simple as looking at the transformation of your car. Now you're being told when to change your oil. You're not changing it just every 3,000 miles. Your car knows, oh, it's been driven lightly, so I can push that to 5,000 or 8,000 miles, or it's been towing a trailer or a boat, as I think a lot of people have been doing as nomads during this period of working from home or from your van or wherever you might happen to be. You may have to change your oil more frequency. So what does this lead to? It's more efficient, it's more time efficient, cost efficient, and then also more reliable. So if you can predictively do the maintenance on your car versus having to bring it in every 3,000 miles, saves time and money, and eventually also saves the reliability of your car. We're also seeing some other different types of transformations and within the workplace, as an example. So we've moved from having desktop phones within our offices to just utilizing our computers for voice calls. So to throw out some numbers out there, we see that about 54% of companies saw business level benefits from doing digital transformation, also see higher revenue growth. 89% of organizations have plans to adopt a digital first business strategy, and $2.3 trillion is being spent on digital transformation solutions. So as we go through the rest of the slides, we'll talk about how these different technologies can be part of the digital transformation, the partnerships that you need, and the infrastructure that needs to be put in place to realize these different savings of efficiency and time as we move from our old way of doing business through this digital transformation. So a couple of things that are keywords that we probably have all heard about is automation, IoT, AI and machine learning, augmented and virtual reality. And so I can talk about some real world examples of some of these different pieces of it. So as we think through this, and there are probably a number of you out there, feel free to add into the chat or the Q&A some of the implementations that you've taken on and the successes or challenges that you've realized by going through these different changes. So one of the keys to be able to successfully implement a digital transformation is be able to look at how do I change my bandwidth dynamically as far as the connectivity goes. As I add more sensors to my network, more augmented reality or video or virtual reality, either for training or for being able to support a technician in the field, that generally requires increased bandwidth. So I have to have that flexibility of my connection to be able to automatically increase bandwidth as needed. Direct access to the cloud providers. And we talked about, and we'll get into a little bit more information around utilizing edge networks for low latency applications. But then there's also the reliance generally on the larger hyperscale cloud platforms as well, either for software programming, and many of these platforms also provide the machine learning and artificial intelligence to generate insights from all of the IoT sensors that are out there. Either those IoT sensors that are making my buildings more efficient, my factory floor more efficient, or being able to track different devices within a healthcare facility. And those low latency edge compute resources are also critical to be able to move into a more automated workplace as well. As we think through automation, be able to quickly be able to turn a machine on or off if I detect a fault within an assembly line, that has to happen within milliseconds. And so if I'm utilizing things such as computer vision to be able to do an inspection, I want to process that data as close to where that computer vision machine or that camera is located to be able to quickly react to any changes on the factory floor. So some questions that you might be asking yourself: when should I decide to make these upgrades to my infrastructure? And how does the fiber infrastructure affect how well you can take advantage of these technologies? As we'll talk about some future parts of the presentation, there are many different connections that would need to be high-speed connections and also flexible connections and very secure as well. Who are the players in this complex ecosystem to realize my successful digital transformation? And how can you set yourself up to make this transition? We'll consider these as we walk through the remainder of the presentation. So as we look at the connectivity infrastructure, many of these different companies that we work with have multiple enterprise locations that need to have high-speed connectivity between those via a private wireless LAN. Then there's the connectivity into the cloud infrastructure provider, to the public internet, and also to an edge data center. All of these requests require robust fiber infrastructure, as well as the ability to change the bandwidth requirements to be able to move from a 1 gig to a 10 gig to a 100 gig circuit if necessary. There's also connections around indoor and outdoor wireless services as well. You think about utilizing your Wi-Fi network. I'll talk about private LTE later on in the presentation, and the connections to your wireless carrier application as well. All of these require a very dense fiber network within the metro area that we're operating within, and also connectivity into key data centers that allow that connection to the cloud infrastructure, to the edge data centers, and also to the public internet. These connections have to be redundant and secure as I access my different software applications, some of which may sit on the cloud infrastructure. Other of these applications may sit within that edge data center, depending upon the latency, the redundancy, and the quality of service requirements that need to be implemented. So as we're talking about these digital transformations that we're making, it's all about the volume of data that's going to be supported as I move into this next level of transformation. Think about the additional sensors that you need. I talked a little bit about using cameras on the factory floor, and some enterprise locations are utilizing cameras as people counters for social distancing. How do I effectively manage people waiting for an elevator within an enterprise? There are lots of different applications that really require those high bandwidth connections, and they continue to grow more and more. So it's really important, as you're also introducing new partners into your digital transformation ecosystem, to understand the connectivity requirements that they require as well to be able to successfully implement a new software platform that may be required as part of your journey. So to get a little bit more specific about who these partners may be, you can work with different system integrators, companies such as Amdocs and Wipro, managed service providers. Those could be companies like IBM or Infosys, the edge data center companies and public cloud providers, IoT equipment, companies like Bosch, Hewlett Packard, Texas Instruments. For those of you that went to engineering school way back in the day, remember Texas Instruments from the calculator days. Now they've moved and they've digitally transformed into more of an IoT company providing sensors for all types of different applications. We have the cloud providers that certainly play a very large role within this ecosystem between Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Certainly you have Oracle, Salesforce, and others out there that are utilizing this cloud infrastructure and providing, as I mentioned previously, the machine learning and artificial intelligence to make us more efficient as we move forward along this digital transformation path. Next, we'll move into some real-world examples of how we enable this and some of the digital transformations that we're seeing right now, right in the field. So one of the things that we see as we go through these different applications, and this is something that Thomas and I have personally worked through working at Crown Castle, is we've got a number of enterprise locations, approximately 100 across the country. As I previously mentioned, we've taken out all of our landline phones and we've moved those into utilizing our computers for voice calls and messaging and everything else. And the other thing that has been a transition for us, moving from working within the office environment, it's really forced us to be more digital centric as far as the collaborative workforce. So I think a number of people out there are using shared documents. You can't necessarily walk down the hall anymore and hand over a stack of paper with your edits on them. It's really looking into this transformation that's accelerated to say, how do I quickly share a document? The presentation that we're going through right now has gone through that exercise where we're using shared documents to make that happen. Other training materials that we're providing to our employees as part of the onboarding, those are all part of this digital transformation. And then also, as we mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, Crown Castle owns approximately 40,000 cell towers across the country. And what we've moved to is, rather than manually inspecting the towers, utilizing tower climbers to look at the integrity and the number of all of the equipment that's on our towers, we're moved into utilizing drones for those types of inspections. It's a safer way to be able to do the tower inspections. We're able to inspect on a more frequent basis, cost effective, looking for changes, creating digital twins of our infrastructure. And you can see this type of transformation going throughout the different industries. Just as I look at the amount of data that's being collected as my drone goes up and inspects the tower, that's a huge amount of data that I now have to process and make sense out of. And that's where this connectivity of moving that data either from the drone to an edge data center to look for the amount of equipment that's on the tower, verify the appropriate wind loading, et cetera. And then also more and different intelligence solutions, looking at augmented reality to be able to visually inspect what I think is the type of antenna that's on the tower, and I can double check that against my database. So verification of all the assets that are on our towers. So those are a couple of examples of how we look at it. Another one is we're working with a company in New York City that's very much at the forefront of building automation. And so we've been working with this company. We've deployed the basic infrastructure for a private wireless network there. And they are utilizing a number of sensors throughout conference rooms. I talked a little bit about monitoring a number of people that are going into an elevator bank to be able to socially distance as they're going up elevators, being able to turn heating and cooling on and off, and lighting as I walk in or use or don't use a conference room. How many people are in that room? How aggressive do I have to be with my cooling on a hot day? We talked a little bit prior to everybody else joining the call, and apparently still very warm in the Detroit area. And so you can certainly want to be able to ramp up that air conditioning, but you don't want to cool every single conference room if half of them are not being occupied. And one example of being more efficient is, I think everybody's probably had the experience of walking into a restroom and seeing a running sink. Now, if I can add a sensor and be able to flag into building maintenance, hey, my sink is running on floor 27 in the men's room, go ahead and address that. That allows me to become more efficient. But what does this mean? These are more and more sensors being added to my network, which is a great thing to be able to do, but I need to have the infrastructure in place to be able to collect the data from all of those sensors and then also make sense of what that data means and how quickly I need to respond to it. So within the use case within New York, using this enterprise, the building owner is seeing huge amounts of efficiencies and cost savings in terms of the heating, air conditioning, the energy utilization by being implemented and being able to create a smart building platform. And that's realized through a combination of wired sensors, wireless sensors, and those wireless sensors are connected via Wi-Fi and also some private LTE and private 5G solutions as well. And then also being able to take all of that data, distill it within the different types of cloud infrastructure using software platforms to make recommendations on how I can become more and more efficient. So as we've talked to this company, the more information they can get, the more intelligent they can be. And so you see this proliferation of the amount of different data sensors that are on the networks. And so this is really, as we're talking about different types of machine-to-machine communications. And we see from the graph that there's no sign of this slowing at all. And just one example that I have is when I looked at the number of connections that I have at my own house, I was shocked to see on my Wi-Fi network, I have 25 plus different connections into my network. I'm like, how did that possibly happen? Well, I've got the Ring doorbell, a Nest thermostat, a Ring alarm system, smartwatches, laptops, TVs, the list goes on. And then you start to realize this is just within my own house. And to be able to take advantage of having all of these sensors and adding additional cameras within it, this is within my own residence, I need to upgrade my infrastructure, my Wi-Fi speeds. And you can see that same type of parallel happening for enterprises as well. It enables me to become more efficient, more comfortable, having the different Ring alarm systems, being alerted when the mailman drops off a package, so that I can quickly have one of my kids go run out and get it, or if the dog's barking, to understand why that's the case. So these are definitely the advantages of being able to have this connected infrastructure in place. And as we move into an enterprise, we see different things like and seeing things happening like that in parallel. So as we're making this transition to having more and more connected devices, it's important to have that infrastructure in place with the bandwidth that's needed. Luckily, I was able to call up my internet service provider, and they were able to increase my bandwidth from a 10 meg circuit to a 50 meg circuit to a 100 meg circuit without having to rip and replace any of the equipment. So this is a relatively straightforward upgrade. And as you think through your partners in this ecosystem, it's really important to understand the upgrade process utilizing those companies as well. Do they have this underlying infrastructure that will support your digital transformation? Otherwise, you could stall in your plans to be able to move into this highly connected state that will make you more efficient as you move into the next phase of working with these different ecosystem partners to realize whatever transformation that you happen to be going through. So a couple of things to think through for these future-proof solutions are that bandwidth will continue to grow, not only from machine-to-machine communications, but also what we utilize in connecting with each other on a daily basis. Certainly, if we look at right now, the webinar that we're on is completely virtual. We're seeing a lot of that hybrid utilization, either from schools to enterprises to the different presentations like we're doing today, and that will continue. It's not always easy to be able to travel to every different event as much as I've enjoyed being able to do that, but being able to have the option to have some of that event being done virtually versus all in person also enables more and more connectivity. It requires more connectivity and additional bandwidth to be utilized. So one of the things that you definitely want to avoid is a forklift upgrade or rip and replace. So as we're talking through the infrastructure that's being put in place, it's how do I provision new circuits relatively quickly without having to pull additional fiber or do a significant upgrade to the infrastructure that I have, either within my enterprise or connecting my different enterprises together, or as I talked about through the connectivity diagram previously, the connections from your enterprise, the edge data network, or into the internet or to the hyperscaler cloud. So all these require robust infrastructure that can be upgraded either on demand or relatively straightforwardly without having to wait for 6 or 9 or 12 months to be able to have that increase in your bandwidth go from a 1 gig circuit to a 10 gig circuit, as an example. One of the things that we think is very important is being able to have infrastructure that is owned and controlled by the providing company. So Crown Castle owns roughly 80,000 miles of dense metro fiber throughout the country. And having that ownership, we know the capability of the different infrastructure that we have. We can have certainty in our timelines to be able to provide increased speeds as required. Services like bandwidth on demand are also available to be able to quickly pivot from a 1 gig circuit to a 10 gig circuit if you need to be able to do that and then if you need to change it from there as well. That's a relatively straightforward process and all part of that digital transformation. So as I talked about these transformations, it's certainly something that we do internally and we see our customers going through as well. So one of the things that we definitely want to be able to avoid is having to do construction every time that we need to have things that change. So if I have a new ecosystem partner that now requires the connectivity from the IoT sensors or the cameras back into an edge data center, I want to be able to have that infrastructure in place to be able to quickly make that transition from my enterprise location to a centralized location, rather than having to build dedicated fiber into that facility. So those are some of the things to think through as my new applications, my new ecosystem partners come online. What are their bandwidth requirements that are needed and connectivity requirements to enable this type of transformation and to take full advantage of the services that they have to offer. When we talk about technologies such as augmented reality, virtual reality, and machine learning, those require a tremendous amount of data to be able to have actionable insights into the data that's being collected. And so that the platforms that are required, the infrastructure required to make that happen is critical to take advantage of these new software services that are available as part of this transformation journey. One of the things that we talk about, and I'm sure that a number of us have experienced this too, anything from going into a restaurant now, you're scanning a QR code for your menus, or into, for example, an Apple store, you're utilizing point of sale devices. So this is a wireless connection that you used to have at a cash register that you walked up to become more efficient. But this impacts everybody from the IT staff to the business process improvement and to the retail staff. So as you move through this transformation journey, it's really important to keep in mind all the different parts of your organization that will be impacted when you make these changes. So just think about that, the idea of scanning your QR code at the restaurant. So how does that change my interaction with my server? In some places, you can actually your server just brings out what you've ordered, your drinks, your food, etc. and your payment is all done online. So there's much less interaction that you might have with that person, for better or for worse. In some cases, you go to a nice restaurant, you would like to have your server explain exactly, what your different options are, the type of food, what your potential wine pairing might be, etc. So there are some different things that the restaurants have to work through with their staff on. As I make this transformation, that doesn't mean you're necessarily completely hands off a customer. Some customers might want that, some might not. So these are things to think through as far as the transformation goes. How is my entire staff being impacted? So I talked a little bit about private wireless networks. And I'll go through this in some more detail here. And so there's an emerging technology, and this has been about a couple of years out, that the FCC allocated spectrum in the 3.5 gigahertz range. And this is called CBRS spectrum, or now it's been branded as ONGO. And what ONGO allows is for a shared or private wireless connections. Right now, those are 4G connections, but they'll be quickly migrating to 5G connections. And as we look to be able to provide private wireless services, having that underlying fiber infrastructure is really critical to be able to connect the different radios, either outdoor radios or in-building radios, into the centralized data center where you have the authentication of the devices that are going onto the networks, and also the connectivity into the internet or to the wireless carriers. One of the really interesting things that being able to use these private wireless networks enables you to do is to be able to do a guaranteed quality of service. Now, as I talk about wireless networks, certainly Wi-Fi and 4G/5G networks are complementary to each other, and really depends upon the use case that you're trying to address of what is the best solution for you. So I talked previously about the different ecosystem partners and the requirements that you may have from the different software platforms, and that will guide you into the type of wireless network that may be required. So one of the key advantages of utilizing a 4G network is you're able to guarantee your quality of service. And that's slightly in contrast to a Wi-Fi network, because within a Wi-Fi network, it's possible that anyone could come up with a Wi-Fi device and use some capacity on that Wi-Fi network, whereas I have more control over a 4G network. So that, what do I mean by the quality of service? I can guarantee a certain amount of bandwidth. I can guarantee a latency requirement. And these are critically important as I look at being able to provide services either within a factory floor, within a hospital, etc. And so the other part of setting up a 4G private network is I have the ability to share that radio not only with my own enterprise for private wireless services, and I'll talk about a few more of those in just a minute, but also to improve my coverage for my wireless carriers as well. So there's enough bandwidth within that 3.5 gigahertz spectrum to be able to provide both private services and then also public services too. So if I have an enterprise location, a factory location where I have poor coverage from my wireless carrier, it's possible to be able to deploy the ONGO solution and have that combination of a private network plus a public-facing network. So for large enterprises, utilizing the ONGO solution, there are many different use cases that can enable you to be able to move through this digital transformation network. I've talked about private networks, which you can create your own access to this. So one of the things that's really interesting with the CBRS network or the ONGO network is it's controlled access into that network. And what I mean by that is, in a different scenario from a Wi-Fi network with this private 4G or 5G network, I need to utilize a SIM card that's then authenticated on the network, and that makes it more secure. So I have complete control over who accesses my network and to what part of that network as well. So I may have different enterprise applications that I may only want an employee to be able to access while they're on site. And I'm able to do that utilizing a private wireless network. So you think about how I can match up that private network with my private VLANs as well. Access for example, the security team within my building to access security cameras, but my retail staff isn't able to access security cameras and vice versa. So this is something that these private networks enable. Some of the future demands with infrastructure, 5G upgradable radios. I talked about that transition from 4G to 5G. One of the advantages of deploying a wireless network as well is just the flexibility. Now, I talked a little bit about the building owner in New York that now wants to add an additional sensors into their network. Either those could be high bandwidth demand sensors like cameras, or they could be simple on-off sensors like my seat is occupied or not. Being able to do that with a wireless solution versus a wired solution, be it fiber or Ethernet, is certainly much more straightforward and quicker than having to pull cables throughout a building. So it's that complementary access of the wired infrastructure plus the wireless infrastructure allows you for that flexibility. I talked a little bit about the shared networks and the benefits therein. So being able to provide not only these private networks, but also supporting of your wireless carriers if that's a solution that needs to be done as well. So one of the things that we think about as far as for being able to provide these private wireless networks and the thought process of, well, why wouldn't I just wire a lot of the equipment that I have? Why do I need a wireless network? Think about doing inspections with inside a plane. So I'm building a new jumbo jet 787, having to pull cables within the plane to be able to look and inspect every part of the fuselage that I'm going through. That's a challenging thing to be able to do. So if I have a wireless network there with cameras to be able to do that inspection, especially with utilizing augmented reality glasses with the technician, that's a very efficient way to be able to move around and through the plane and gives you a lot more flexibility on what you're doing there. So that would be one use case. Another one would be having a autonomous forklift on a warehouse floor. This is a low latency application that requires a very robust network. You can't have that network going down as the forklift is driving around. And having the ability to provide wide area coverage as well. So this is another example of what OnGo can provide for you on this private 4G network. It's wide area coverage, guaranteed quality of service, low latency applications. And so I'm able to take all this different information and marry that with the augmented reality and also machine learning to be able to become more efficient either within my factory floor, within my building, or within my warehouse. Healthcare is another great example of where these different types of technologies apply as well. So I'm going to go ahead and show a short video here on a healthcare application, and my understanding is that the audio is a little bit quiet, so I'll go ahead and voice over some of the presentation as well. So this woman is calling the emergency operator because this person has had a heart attack within the middle of the floor. And so the emergency operator is telling the woman that a drone with a defibrillator is on its way and that she needs to be prepared, and they have his location to be able to provide this emergency medical assistance. And now she's dropping communication with the phone and she's being talked to through the drone itself. So she doesn't have to manage the connection with the phone and the drone. So you can see there's a video camera within the drone, and she's being instructed on how to apply the defibrillator to the gentleman who's had a heart attack. So as you can see, apply the defibrillator, an ambulance that should be on its way to be able to transport him and check all the vital signs, et cetera, as he moves to the hospital. But this is a great example as we move forward, having that connectivity either through a wireless network or a wired network really is life-saving and transformational. One of the applications that I saw with Carnegie Mellon is taking that one step further. And there were augmented reality glasses on the defibrillator that guided the person through where to exactly place the different pads on the victim so that would the defibrillator work properly. So these are some use cases that we're seeing by being able to have that really robust connectivity. As we think about different healthcare use cases as well, there are applications around either transferring large data files or having them visible to specialists within the area, or being able to infer different types of learning on MRIs, et cetera. Another use case that I think is really helpful, especially now that people are working from home or not able to go ahead and visit their doctor or physical therapist, is doing physical therapy training using augmented reality glasses. So this puts a person through and provides them feedback, automatic feedback on are they doing their exercises correctly. There's the use cases that I will certainly not be first in line for around doing remote surgery. I'm still holding off on that one. I'm happy to do the remote physical therapy surgery. That's where I draw a line. As much as I love the robust infrastructure that we have in place, I'll go into the hospital for that. Thank you very much. So the next part I'd like to talk about are some different types of edge solutions. And I alluded to those recently around having that connectivity from your enterprise, from the venue, from the data center, from the manufacturing floor into the edge data center for locations. So one of the things that we're starting to see right now is, and one use case is gambling on sports events. These are low latency applications. So either within the venue or at home, you're able to decide, are they going to make it on, what kind of call are they going to call on third down? Is it going to be a pass or a run? And you can bet on things like this. Not necessarily advocating that's a great idea, but it certainly makes going to a sporting event much more entertaining. So you have to have, for an edge application, that really decentralized data processing. And rather than using a very large data center to be able to transmit all this data, video, sensors, et cetera, you have a distributed collection of edge data centers. And those edge data centers could be within a manufacturing facility, at the base of a cell tower, or within a venue. And one of the advantages of the edge data centers, there's several. Not only are those low latency connections that we've talked about previously, but also the redundancy that those allow as well. So if you think about having processing capability at multiple edge data center locations, that makes your network more robust. And of course, those locations need to be able to be connected via fiber. And we've certainly seen all the destruction that's happened recently within the New Orleans and Philadelphia and New York, and having one of these data centers go down and being able to shift my workloads from one small edge data center to another edge data center makes my network more robust. The ability, I talked about sharing my documents, if I can have those at multiple distributed locations. Overall, I have much more resiliency within my network. At this point, I'll go ahead and wrap up this part of the presentation and turn it over to Tommy to see if we have any questions that we can answer.
Thanks, Mark. Great presentation. Really appreciate it. And for those that may not be familiar with Crown Castle, we are the nation's largest provider of shared communications infrastructure in the country. We own and operate over 40,000 towers, 80,000 miles of fiber, and 80,000 small cells that are either on air or under contracts, pretty much in every major U.S. market. As you, the business leaders of today, look to the future, infrastructure is going to play an absolutely vital role in what you do tomorrow, and hopefully will be a valid partner for you moving forward. With that, we'll take some questions from the audience. 。 All right, I think we have the first question in here. What companies do you see doing the best job of preparing for future expansion? What specifically are they doing well and others should emulate?
Yeah, so the thing that I've seen from different companies that are looking through future expansion is really taking a step back and understanding their digital transformation journey. So not tactically what do I need to do today, but where do I want to be in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months from now? Because as I put this infrastructure in place, I want to be able to anticipate where my connectivity needs are, the number of sensors, et cetera, the applications that need to be supported over time. So I talked about some of the different ecosystem partners that have use cases that are available on their websites. Those could be companies like IBM and Oracle and Infosys and Amdocs. So I look at those as the vertical that you're interested in exploring. Many of these different companies have those case studies on their websites. So really, I think the key takeaway is don't look at where you want to go within the next 6 months. Take a look from a very high level where you want to be in 36 months or longer, because that helps you lay out that roadmap and anticipate your future needs as your connectivity requirements continue to grow.
Excellent, thanks. Next question. Can any kind of fiber infrastructure be used to help prepare for additional connectivity? If not, what should I be looking for in a fiber provider? I think since I'm the sales guy, I'll take this one. Just like most technologies, you should be looking to the future on how to determine the right kind of fiber infrastructure to plan for. If you're planning on growth, prefer private dedicated fiber, or potentially to roll out a DAS, OnGo, CBRS, smart building application, then you'll need to account for all of that and should overbuild your fiber infrastructure, which is a lot more economical doing it at the beginning than trying to do that down the road. You also want to think about how you plan to manage your fiber infrastructure. Do you have the staffing? Do you have expertise? Do you have 24/7 availability to handle potentially issues such as unintended cuts, splicing, et cetera? Or is it better to have a shared access infrastructure while leaving the management to of the infrastructure to a skilled provider? So those are all things you want to consider. But just as Mark said on the previous question, you really want to look for the long term, not the short term, on how you manage and handle that. Next question. What's the best way to go about identifying the best partners for a need? Where do you start?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that I alluded to previously is looking at the different providers that are out there. There are environments like this where Automation Alley puts on these different events, different partners or companies that may be within your same vertical. So if you're in the manufacturing vertical, there's certainly conferences that you can attend, looking at these different digital transformations. Do you want to accomplish something similar to one of your partners within the manufacturing space? What providers have they utilized? What are the software companies that they can recommend to help you along this journey? And generally these are starting from a larger scale companies. As I mentioned, there's companies like Wipro, Amdocs, Infosys, et cetera. Certainly the hyperscalers provide these types of solutions as well, and the wireless carriers too. So it depends upon the use cases that you have, which partners might you want to look at, but certainly educating yourself through webinars such as this one and others that are similar that address your specific vertical, I think that would be a great place to start.
Excellent. Next up, how soon will edge solutions be a reality?
So the question on the timing for edge solutions, we're seeing them right now. And so we're starting to roll out some of the edge solutions, and many of the wireless carriers have deployed a number of edge sites across the country. This is not just a US-centric phenomenon. We're seeing edge solutions being rolled out worldwide. And as I mentioned previously, we're working very closely with Carnegie Mellon, because one of the questions that comes up, how do I monetize this edge infrastructure? What are the use cases behind it? So it's not only from the university space, but also startups. There's an innovation zone that T-Mobile has set up. AT&T has also some 5G and edge application test beds, as well as Verizon. And we're seeing similar things from the hyperscaler companies. So edge computing applications, they're here today. We're seeing those within enterprises, and I've talked a little bit about having some the sensor data collected on site And we'll just see that expand as we move forward, especially as I can tie into consumer-facing applications. So right now, they might not see as much edge applications because they're focused more business to business on the enterprise. But as we move into some consumer-facing, a not quite edge application that many people might be familiar with is Pokemon Go. As I move into a gaming application with augmented reality, certainly having a more advanced version of that is going to be an edge application that has attraction for the consumer. I mentioned being able to do gambling on sports venues, etc. So we're seeing that movement in the direction. I would say more consumer applications on a wider scale basis in a 12 to 24 month time frame. A lot of this is contingent upon as the wireless carriers deploy more and more of their 5G network and have a 5G core in place that enables that low latency connectivity, therefore a great customer experience on a 5G network.
Great. And last question, and somewhat of a follow-up to the last one, is how soon you'll see OnGo be a reality?
Yeah, so OnGo has already been, is a reality. It's been deployed, and there are commercial networks across the country. We have seen some of these deployments, and for those that are interested in learning more, I would recommend taking a look at the OnGo Alliance website. As far as Crown Castle goes, we've deployed, as I mentioned previously, an OnGo Alliance building within New York City. We've got, or a building in New York City with an OnGo solution in it. We've got an outdoor network in the Midwest as well. And so these are live, active, and there are a number of different, all the new iPhones, Samsung phones, etc., support the OnGo frequency band. And so we're seeing wide-scale deployments of the OnGo solution right now, both from a private networking standpoint, some of the things that I've mentioned, but also the wireless carriers are deploying the OnGo frequency band to be able to provide increased capacity on their networks too.
Excellent. Well, that was our last question. So I'd like to thank everyone for personally coming out today. If you still have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached at thomas.lenahan, Lenahan, @crowncastle.com, and we can continue the conversation from there. So thanks again, and thank you for coming out today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark and Thomas, for sharing your expertise with us today. As I mentioned, if there's any questions that weren't answered, feel free to send them to Thomas as well as Automation Alley. Don't forget, this will be recorded and will live on our website. So feel free to share it with customers, friends, coworkers, anything like that. We will have it to be able to rewatch. And stay tuned for our next tech takeover that will be on September 15th with Tata Technologies. And like I said, this tech takeover, as well as all of the others, are archived and recorded on our website. So be sure to continue to upskill yourself with everything in terms of Industry 4.0. Thank you guys both again, and thank you everybody who joined us today. Have a great afternoon.